natives, the guys that play in the truly convergent digital spaces like Facebook and Amazon and Uber and so on. And let's look at their share price performance. The first group of companies, over 10 years, have seen an average 1% compound annual growth rate in their share price over 10 years, which is essentially going nowhere. In a slightly inflating global economy, they've stayed absolutely still. The second group, who have actually moved significantly their products and services into the digital era, they've done quite well. They've seen a 9% compound annual growth rate, which is pretty good. And the third group, the true digital players, they've seen 40% compound annual growth, which is incredible. You put that over 10 years and you're talking thousands of percent growth over a 10-year period. So the first data point I'd like to share is truly convergent players, even in the tech sector, are outperforming their non-digital counterparts by orders of magnitude. The second data I'd like to share with you is I did some work a while ago with Delta Partners, a research house, where we said, is there a correlation between the digital readiness of the market that you operate in and the performance of the businesses that operate there? So we derived a composite index of digital readiness of the market, and then we compared that against the revenue. So the pink line is the financial performance, the revenue, the profit, and the valuation. And I think the thing that you can see from all of these, there is an incredible correlation between the digital readiness of the market that a company operates in and the financial performance of the digital players active there. And I think the key takeaway for me when I look at this happens to be US data, because the data was available. But as the South African society and as our marketplace becomes more digitally mature, more digitally ready, the opportunities for financial performance for those of us that are bold enough and courageous enough and foresighted enough to launch businesses that operate in these markets, I think we might start seeing our own Uber or our own Tencent or our own Alibaba coming out of Africa. But then the final piece of data that I'd like to share with these people is but this still talks about the tech sector. What about other sectors? There's a Stanford economist called Mordecai Kurtz who's recently published a paper, and he's looked at all 4,200 listed US companies. And he's looked at their performance over a period of more than 30 years. And what he finds is that the firms of the quintile of firms with the highest, what he defines a term called surplus wealth, the vast majority of them are significantly transformed by ICT. At the other extreme, the firms with the smallest surplus wealth are not transformed by ICT. And so he presents very compelling evidence in strict and sort of hardcore economic terms that with increasing levels of ICT transformation, you get significantly increasing wealth creation. So I think, to start off with, I think what I'm saying is, this isn't something that is just for the tech companies. It is something for everybody and all of us to recognize that there is value to be created as the market becomes more digitally ready. Those of us that are more in tune with the technology opportunities and bringing tech in have the opportunity to differentiate and create wealth for ourselves and our shareholders. But that is it's a starting point. It says so business performance is related to digital adoption. But then the question in all of our heads is, how do we drive digital in our business? And let me take a bit of time to unpack this. And I think it's really important when we talk about digital transformation, a lot of people think it's mainly about this axis. It's about how we do business. A point I'd like to make is it's also about what business we do. Now let me take a bit of a detour here and try and illustrate this using a sporting metaphor. I wish I could have found the data to do this for soccer, but I could only find the right data for tennis. So the question is, why does Roger Federer make so much money? And I'm sure there's probably about 150 people in the room, I'd probably get 300 answers. But then if I say, but if he played badminton, and of course the answer is no, he wouldn't have made so much money. So the reason Roger Federer makes so much money comes down to two factors. The first is, tennis is a very lucrative sport. Pick your game, pick the game that you play very carefully. And the second reason Roger Federer makes so much money is he plays it much better than everybody else. He knows how to win. And business strategy is pretty much, this is like strategy 101 simplified. Business strategy is about pick the game you want to play, pick your market, where do you play, and once you've decided that, how do you win? So let me go into those two factors a little bit more from a digital perspective. So where to play? It happens to be, by the way, that the industry you play also matters. So if you look at 3,000 companies from around the world and you put them into different sectors, so you've got from pharmaceuticals through to airlines and electric utilities, you see in some industries the average economic profit for the sector is higher compared to others. It doesn't mean that if you're here, you can't make a profit. It just means that the odds are a little bit stacked against you. So I guess we need to be careful that SAA and Eskom don't use this as an excuse. But anyway, the industry, the game you play matters. But it comes down even more granular than that. So if McKinsey looked at the sort of top 200 global growth companies in Europe and the US, and I'm afraid this is their data because we haven't yet had time to do research to get data of our own. For 7 years, from 1999 to 2005, and they said, where does their growth come from? And these companies grew on average by 8.6% compound annual growth over the 7-year period, so it's not bad growth. Where did that growth come from? What was interesting is that 2/3 of the growth, so 5.5% of 8.6%, so two-thirds of the growth came from the segments they were playing in. They were playing in mobile telecoms. Mobile telecoms grew, so they grew. They were playing in next generation pharmaceuticals. That sector grew, so the company grew. So segment growth came from, accounted for 2/3 of it. Mergers and acquisitions, essentially buying the growth, accounted for the other third of it. And what was shocking for me is I've run sales organizations where our job as the sales organization is to grow market share. Market share growth only accounted for 0.1% of those companies' growth. Now let's be clear, this does not apply to entrepreneurial businesses. So it does not apply to attackers in a segment where it has to come from market share growth. These are for the incumbents in the segment. But I think the important point is that the growth that these companies, and I'm going to build this really quickly, so the sort of World Trade Organization and so on divide the global economy into 11 sectors, 24 industry groups, 68 industries, 157 sub-industries, and thousands of segments. But what was interesting is that the growth portfolios came by making the right choices in the portfolios at the segment level. It's not so much the sector or the industry group that the companies were playing in that drove their growth. That segment growth that I referred to came by making choices in those right segments. And I do think that applies equally to entrepreneurial businesses as it applies to large-scale businesses. Pick the segments at a detailed, granular level very carefully. I'd like to take a little bit of a detour now as well, because I believe that when we think about where to play, is Uber a transport business or a tech business? Tech. Is Amazon a retailer or a tech business? Tech. Is Airbnb hospitality or tech? I would suggest something interesting. And it comes from this is not as academically rigorous point of view as a sort of a Brian Armstrong thought. I believe that innovation and creativity happen when two disparate things come together. So for example, when oxygen and hydrogen meet, you get water. When fuel and oxygen meet, you get fire. When men and women meet, maybe you get love, hopefully. And then when egg and sperm meet, you get life. And something that's close to my heart, when blues and gospel meet, you get rock and roll. So the point being is when you put things that are qualitatively different together, and in that intersection, innovation and creativity spark, and wonderful things happen. And I believe that Uber is a transport company built on tech, and Amazon is a retail company founded on tech. The point I want to make, and I think this is very true in terms of where to play in the digital economy, is find those places, whether it's in banking or media or insurance or retail or transport and logistics, and help